In the city that never sleeps, a janitor quietly wipes down the gleaming glass hallways, no one knowing what he has sacrificed just to have a few hours each morning with his little daughter. Somewhere else, on the top floor of a financial tower, a powerful female executive signs million-dollar contracts, convinced that money and prestige could fill the emptiness in her 5-year-old daughter's heart. Two worlds that seem destined never to meet. Yet sometimes, a cruel prank, a chance no one could have predicted, opens the door to encounters that change destinies. And in that meeting, what seemed meant only for ridicule becomes the first step of a healing journey, not only for the two children, but also for the adults who had long lost faith in happiness. The night shift at Hale Capitol Tower ended in silence. Endless polished hallways reflected the cold, white neon lights, like a never-ending river of glass and steel. The clock struck 7 in the morning, and the first employees of the day had not yet arrived. In a secluded corner of the ground floor, a man in a gray-blue janitor's uniform pushed a heavy cart back to the supply room. That was Ethan Cole. 39 years old, tall and lean but solid, his skin darkened from years of night shifts. He pulled off his rubber gloves, calloused hands revealed, and sat down on a plastic chair, leaning back with a sigh. Another night completed, unnoticed, no one remembering his face. But for him, that didn't matter. This job gave him what he needed, a modest wage and, most importantly, the daytime free to be with his daughter. The night shift at Hale Capitol Tower ended in silence. The clock struck 7, the first sunlight of the day filtering through giant glass panes. Ethan removed his gloves, rough hands exposed, then folded the mop cart back into storage. Another night's work is finished. He put on his jacket, stepped out to the street, and merged into the rushing crowd hurrying toward their offices, except he walked in the opposite direction. The old pickup truck carried him out of the city center, toward the suburbs. Within half an hour, the skyline gave way to sparkling water and rows of maple trees turning color. A small lakeside house appeared, white-painted walls, brown tiled roof, a wooden porch weathered but clean. Out front stretched a green lawn where Sophie often ran barefoot, and behind, the still lake mirrored the sky. Ethan had chosen this place for its peace. Not luxurious, but warm. A home that sheltered just enough, where he could sit with his daughter each morning, listening to birdsong and catching the faint scent of toast drifting through the air. At the window, left slightly open, Sophie had already been awake for some time. Her blonde hair tied loosely to one side, she sat at a small wooden table, coloring intently. Hearing the truck pull up outside, she leapt from her chair and dashed to the porch. "Daddy, you're home!" she shouted, nearly dropping her crayon. Ethan bent down, arms open, scooping her up and spinning her once across the porch. Her giggles rang out, blending with the breeze over the lake, as if the world in that moment contained nothing but the two of them. Setting her down, he quickly prepared breakfast, golden fried bread spread with strawberry jam, plus a sliced apple. Sophie ate while chattering away. Today the class would have a drawing contest. She planned to draw a castle with a rainbow. Her friend Lucy had new markers. The teacher promised whoever drew best would have their picture displayed on the main board. Ethan listened attentively, not wanting to miss a single detail. This was his world. Childish stories, tiny joys. He had already lost too much, and now all that mattered was watching Sophie grow up in peace, never lacking love. At that same moment, on the other side of the city, a different morning unfolded. On the 32nd floor of a luxury apartment, Sunlight filtered through silver curtains, bouncing off the gleaming glass. Victoria Hale sat upright at her desk, brown hair tied in a neat bun, laptop glowing with charts and figures. She had been awake since 5, not because of an alarm, but out of habit. At 37, Victoria was Chief Investment Officer of Hale Capital, one of America's leading financial conglomerates. To hold that position, she had sacrificed everything: time, health, even the peace of family life. Her husband had left after a fierce argument about lifestyle. He wanted a simple home, but she believed success and wealth were the true foundation. Since that day, this spacious apartment has housed only 2 people. In the corner of the room, 5-year-old Emma Hale sat quietly with her box of Legos. Tiny hands stacked brick upon brick, patiently building a tower that swayed precariously. No morning greeting, no little songs like other children. Only heavy silence. "What do you want for breakfast?" Victoria asked, voice even, eyes never leaving the screen. Emma gave no reply. She only bowed her head and added another green block to the top. Victoria paused for a second, her eyes meeting her daughter's. Bitterness flickered. Then her phone buzzed with a reminder for the 8 o'clock board meeting. She stifled a sigh, reaching to call the nanny to arrive earlier than usual. "You'll be taken care of in the best way," she told herself, as if for comfort. The best meant elite kindergarten, specialized doctors, and expensive toys. Yet Emma stayed silent. Victoria deliberately avoided admitting that perhaps what Emma needed was not those things, but her mother's presence. 2 mornings, 2 worlds. One single father chose night shifts and a weathered house, so that each morning he could hear his daughter's stories, see her radiant smile. One single mother sat atop a skyscraper, holding power and colossal numbers in her hands, yet helpless in the face of her daughter's silence. They did not yet know of each other's existence. But the gears of fate were turning, and in just a few days, an office prank, born of arrogance and idleness, would draw them together, opening a journey that would not only change the 2 adults, but rewrite the childhoods of their daughters. On the 18th floor of Hale Capital Tower, where the investment division was based, early afternoons often carried a heavy air. Reports, numbers, and emails collided in dizzying waves. Yet in the corner of a small conference room, 3 young men in expensive suits snickered like schoolboys. Richard Grant, Deputy Director of the Finance Division, led the pack. Hair slicked back, arrogant smile, he always considered himself the center of attention. Beside him sat 2 loyal assistants, men ready to echo any joke to curry favor with their superior. "You all know how uptight Hale is," Richard smirked, voice low but gleaming with mischief. "Not a single employee dares breathe too loudly in her presence. Cold as ice. I wonder if we sat her across from a janitor, what her reaction would be." The group burst into laughter. The idea had come in a fleeting moment, but the more they considered it, the more amusing it seemed. A small diversion, a story to whisper in the hallways. They thought no further, desiring only a moment's entertainment. That afternoon, while Ethan was cleaning glass in the grand lobby, Richard approached him. It was the first time he had ever initiated a conversation. "Mr. Cole, are you free tonight?" Richard asked, his tone laced with a false friendliness. Ethan looked up, slightly taken aback. In 3 years working there, few men in tailored suits from the upper floors had ever noticed a janitor. He nodded cautiously. "Is there something you need, Mr. Grant?" "Just a little get-together," Richard replied, eyes glinting with calculation. A young woman from another department. Truth is, she's quite fond of you. We just want to give you two a chance to meet. Marlowe's restaurant, 8 o'clock tonight. Don't keep her waiting. Ethan frowned. I think there's been a mistake. I have to care for my daughter. Richard chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder as if they were old friends. Mr. Cole, everyone knows you're a devoted father. But just one evening, surely Sophie can stay with her aunt for a few hours. Trust me, opportunities like this don't come twice. Don't let her wait in vain. Ethan stayed silent. He wanted to refuse, but the mocking glances nearby made the words catch in his throat. In the end, he simply nodded, eager to escape the situation. Inside, he promised himself he would not go. Ethan returned to the lakeside home by late afternoon. The breeze off the water tousled his hair as he parked the old pickup in the yard and stepped onto the porch, quietly unlocking the door. Inside, Sophie sat on the rug, crayons scattered everywhere. Seeing her father, she rushed forward, wrapping her arms around him, chattering about her school day. Ethan tidied the crayons while listening, nodding, and smiling. What happened at school today, sweetheart? Tell me everything, he asked. Sophie's eyes widened, her smile bright. Oh yes, the class is going on a field trip. I'll bring my crayons to draw flowers, draw the lake. I'm so excited. Sounds wonderful, Ethan said with a soft laugh, stacking the drawing papers. My girl always loves colors. Then Sophie tilted her head, clear blue eyes searching his face. And what about you, Daddy? Did anything fun happen to you today? Ethan froze. He slid the last crayon into the box and exhaled. Someone invited me to a dinner, but I think it's just a joke, so I wasn't planning to go. Sophie frowned. You're not going to go? No, I don't see the point. I have you. That's enough. The little girl was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. But if you don't go, she'll sit and wait alone. That would be sad. I don't want anyone to be left behind. Ethan felt shaken. His 7-year-old had voiced something he had never considered. He bent down, resting his hand on her small shoulder. Then here's the deal. If I go, you'll go with me. I want everyone to know I have a daughter. We're always a family. Sophie clapped her hands in delight. Then I'll wear my prettiest pink dress, Ethan laughed, pulling her into a hug. In that moment, the decision was made. Across the city, Victoria Hale was reviewing documents when her phone rang. Richard Grant's voice was brisk. There's a self-made businessman who deeply admires you. He would love to invite you to dinner. Marlowe's restaurant, 8 o'clock. It's a good opportunity. Victoria hesitated. Normally, she ignored such invitations, but weariness tugged at her, and she agreed. Fine. Just one dinner. As she prepared to leave, her sister called, apologizing for being stuck in traffic and unable to watch Emma. With the city gridlocked, there was no alternative. Victoria glanced at her daughter, sitting quietly with the box of Legos, and sighed. You'll come with me tonight. Emma took her mother's hand, nodding silently. Marlowe's restaurant shimmered with golden lights reflected in crystal glasses. Ethan entered with Sophie, his plain shirt making him seem out of place amid the opulence. From another entrance, Victoria appeared with Emma. When their eyes met, both froze. Not a businessman, not just an ordinary employee, but them, a janitor and a CIO. Richard and his assistants lurked in the corner, secretly filming. They awaited a spectacle of humiliation. The air was thick with tension at first. Ethan was ready to rise and leave, but Sophie clung tightly to his hand. Daddy, sit down. I want to eat with my new friend. Emma hesitated, then quietly sat beside her mother. While the adults remained tense, the children broke the silence. "What color do you like?" Sophie asked. Emma didn't speak, only pointed to her blue dress. Sophie's eyes lit up. "Oh, blue, that's great! I have a really nice blue crayon." Ethan smiled, folding a napkin into the shape of a rabbit and placing it before the girls. Sophie clapped with glee. Emma watched closely, and then, at last, the corners of her mouth curved upward, a smile, small, but the first in many months. Victoria was stunned. She hadn't seen her daughter smile since the day her father had left. And now, that miracle had come from a man she had never once considered. In the corner, Richard's face darkened. The prank had veered wildly off script. On the way home after the strange dinner at Marlowe's, Sophie chattered endlessly. From the back seat, she kept repeating Emma's name, saying how she had smiled, promising that next time she would bring her blue crayon as a gift. Ethan drove in silence, listening, his heart warmed. He couldn't remember the last time his daughter had spoken about a friend with such excitement. In the high-rise apartment, Victoria quietly bathed Emma. When she pulled the blanket over her daughter, she was surprised to see Emma holding the restaurant napkin, fumbling to fold it. Her little hands were clumsy, but her eyes shone with an unusual brightness. Victoria sat down on the bed, her heart softening. How long had it been since her daughter had felt joy in something so simple? In the days that followed, Sophie couldn't stop talking about Emma. "Daddy, next time I'll draw a rainbow with her. Daddy, she has such a pretty smile. I want to play with her again." Ethan only smiled, offering no promises. He knew that the meeting had been a coincidence, not easily repeated, but he couldn't bring himself to extinguish the fresh spark of joy in his daughter's heart. As for Victoria, each evening after returning from work, she found Emma scribbling with a pencil, something rare before. The lines were rough and uncertain, but it was clear Emma was changing. Victoria felt both joy and confusion. Why could a stranger do what neither she nor the specialists had managed? That weekend, Ethan took Sophie downtown for school supplies. Passing Riverside Park, Sophie pleaded, "Daddy, can we go in just a little? I want to draw flowers here." Ethan saw the eagerness in her eyes and couldn't refuse. They spread a small blanket on the grass, Sophie eagerly sketching the wild daisies along the path with her crayons. Suddenly, Sophie exclaimed, "Daddy, it's Emma!" Ethan looked up. Along the walkway, Victoria was guiding Emma. They stopped as Sophie ran toward them. Emma hesitated, but then, as if by instinct, she clasped her friend's hand, her eyes lighting up. Victoria was astonished. She had never seen her daughter take the initiative like this. Sophie cheerfully tugged her to the blanket. "You draw the flowers, I'll draw the lake," Sophie said, handing her a crayon. Emma stayed quiet, but accepted the crayon and carefully drew pale green petals. Ethan stepped closer, giving Victoria a slight nod. "I didn't expect to see you here. I'm sorry about the other night. I had no idea they had arranged that." Victoria pressed her lips together. "Neither did I, but—" Her gaze shifted to Emma, tilting her head as she drew with Sophie. "I have to thank you." She hadn't smiled for nearly a year. And yet that night, her voice faltered. Ethan said nothing, only watched the two girls in silence. After a while, he spoke softly. "I used to work in a field related to children, but now I just want to be a father." Victoria turned toward him, briefly surprised. He offered no further explanation. His eyes stayed fixed on Sophie, warm and unwavering. In that moment, she realized the man before her was not just a janitor, but someone carrying love and patience rarely found. The sun sank lower, scattering gold across the grass. Sophie and Emma ran back, holding up their joint drawing, a blue lake surrounded by colorful flowers, with a rainbow arching above. "Emma and I drew it together, Daddy," Sophie announced proudly. Victoria looked at the picture, then at her daughter. Emma clutched her friend's hand, her lips curving into another rare smile. Victoria's heart tightened. Ethan, meanwhile, smiled quietly. He knew that from this day on, a bond had been tied, not born of a cruel office prank, but of the pure and innocent strength of two children. In the days after the strange dinner at Marlowe's and the unexpected encounter at Riverside Park, the four of them began moving into a new orbit, though none of them realized it yet. Every morning, Sophie woke with a story about Emma. As she colored, she chirped, "Emma likes blue. I'll give her my blue crayon." Or, "Next time we'll draw a rainbow together." Each time, Ethan only smiled, nodding quietly. He felt his daughter's joy like sunlight piercing through long, colorless days. Emma, too, was changing. Once she had only sat clutching her box of Legos, her eyes vacant. Now, each evening, Victoria found her holding a pencil, sketching a few clumsy lines on paper. One night, Emma even placed a napkin, awkwardly folded, on her pillow, smiling faintly before drifting to sleep. The smile was small, but to Victoria it was the first glimmer of light after a storm that had lasted far too long. Ethan continued his quiet work inside Hale Capitol Tower. He pushed his mop cart along the gleaming hallways, hearing the hurried clicks of employees' shoes. Sometimes they passed him without a glance, as if he were invisible. Some even sidestepped him mid-conversation, laughing, without bothering to greet him. Ethan didn't mind. He was used to it. After each shift, he only longed for the small lakeside house, where Sophie waited to tell him her joyful stories. Victoria, meanwhile, began every morning with an endless stream of meetings and emails, yet her mind often drifted back to her daughter. She watched Emma focus on her rough little drawings, saw her eyes light up when Sophie called through Ethan's phone. In those moments, Victoria's heart wavered. For months, renowned therapists and enormous fees had achieved nothing, and yet, in just a few brief encounters, a man she had never once noticed had sparked change in her child. That evening, Victoria entered her study. Rows of finance manuals and investment guides lined the shelves. In one corner, covered in dust, sat a book a colleague had once given her, saying, "This might help Emma." Victoria had brushed it off with a faint smile, placing it aside and forgetting. Work had always consumed her, and she had never believed words on a page could change reality. But tonight was different. The image of Emma smiling over a folded napkin lingered in her mind. A fragile thread of hope slipped into her heart. Victoria sighed, pulled the book down, brushed off the dust, and sat at her desk. The cover read, "Closed Doors and How to Open Them Again. A Healing Journey for Children After Trauma." Her hand trembled as she turned the first page. The author's introduction appeared. Bold letters, Dr. Ethan Cole. Beside it, a photo of a young man, gentle smile, bright eyes. Victoria froze. There was no mistaking him. It was the same man she had met at the restaurant, at the park. The man who mopped the floors of Hale Capitol Tower each day. Memories flooded back. Emma's smile at Marlowe's. The napkin folded into a rabbit. His vague words. "I used to work with children." And Sophie's innocent voice. "Daddy helped lots of kids not be sad anymore." Victoria flipped a few more pages. The words struck her. "Every wounded child is a closed door. Force will never break it open. We must knock patiently. and use love to unlock it. She closed the book, sitting motionless. Her hand gripped the cover as if clinging to an undeniable truth. Gratitude and confusion tangled inside her. Why would a renowned child psychologist abandon everything to work as a janitor in silence? Why had he hidden that past? And more importantly, could she truly trust him? The man who, through a simple game, had brought her daughter's smile back. That night, the city outside her window still blazed with light, but inside the vast apartment, Victoria lay awake. Questions churned through her heart, mingling with a fragile spark of hope. The first she had felt in many years. The next morning, Victoria walked into Hale Capitol Tower. White light from the halogen lamps spilled across the marble floor, reflecting the hurried silhouettes of dozens of employees rushing past. In the midst of that pounding rhythm, she suddenly stopped. Ethan was kneeling in the hallway, mop in hand, carefully scrubbing away a coffee stain. He seemed like a forgotten stillness within the bustling picture. Employees passed without a glance. One nearly tripped over his bucket, muttered a careless, "sorry," and kept laughing with a colleague. For a moment, Victoria's chest tightened. That man, the author whose book had been cited in countless journals, the man who had made Emma smile again, was being treated as if he had never existed. Her mind was unsettled the entire day. Around the conference table, her colleagues' voices droned on about charts and profits, but in her head only two words echoed: Ethan Cole. Last night, reading the book's introduction, seeing his name had shaken her heart. Now, sitting in the same building where he worked in silence, the truth weighed even heavier. When the workday ended and the halls emptied, Victoria hesitated, then turned toward the basement level. A dim yellow light glowed from the storage room at the far end. The door was ajar, and inside Ethan was carefully putting gloves back on the shelf, stowing bottles of cleaning solution, ready to leave. "Mr. Cole," her voice rang out, firm. Ethan looked up, surprised. "Miss Hale? Is something wrong?" Victoria stepped inside, her heartbeat quick. "I read Closed Doors and How to Open Them Again. You're the author, aren't you?" The small room seemed to still. Ethan stayed silent for a few seconds, then nodded faintly. "So you found it." "I didn't just find it." Her voice deepened, eyes glistening. "I saw Emma change. She laughed, she drew, she came alive again. And I know, it started with you." Ethan sat down on the old wooden chair, his hands clasped tightly together. He sighed. "I'm not the man in that book anymore." "Why?" Victoria took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "Why would someone praised as a leading expert, someone who could save so many children, choose to be a janitor?" His eyes shifted toward the door, where Sophie patiently waited for her father. His voice was slow, heavy. "I once thought saving many lives was the goal. I buried myself in work, packed schedules, flights everywhere for lectures. But while I was saving other children, I neglected my own family. My wife died in a car accident. I realized I hadn't been there for her enough, and I almost lost Sophie too. So I walked away from it all. I just want to be a complete father." Victoria fell silent. His words pierced her chest like a blade. She remembered the years she had chosen work over her daughter. She had justified it by giving Emma the best schools, the best nannies. But her daughter's hollow eyes proved the opposite. "Do you realize," her voice cracked, "you accomplished what all the specialists and expensive treatments failed to do? Simply by being present, by treating Emma as a normal child." Ethan shook his head, offering a sad smile. "I didn't heal her. I only did what a father does for his daughter." Maybe Emma needed that simplicity, not the sterile walls of therapy rooms. In the small space, only the buzz of the fluorescent light and the whisper of wind through the crack in the door remained. Two people, one who had chased power, one who had abandoned glory, sat in silence, sharing a deep understanding. At last, Victoria nodded, her voice soft. "Thank you, Ethan. Not just for Emma, but for the lesson you've given me." He looked up, eyes gentle yet firm. "I don't want to return to the past. I only want to protect the present. And that present is Sophie." Victoria drew a long breath, bowing her head in understanding. But as she stepped out of the storage room, her heart was in turmoil. Respect, gratitude, and somewhere within, a fragile spark of hope stirred. Not far away, in the shadowed corridor, another face glimmered with a cold smile. Richard Grant, the man behind the cruel prank, had happened to pass by and witnessed the scene. He raised his phone, snapped a few photos. His eyes gleamed with calculation. The boardroom on the 28th floor of Hale Capital gleamed under bright lights, yet the atmosphere was heavy as molten iron. Around the polished, long table, the board members sat in rows, faces taut. Victoria Hale, the youngest CIO in the company's history, sat at the head of the table, her posture composed, though a storm raged within. Beside her, Emma sat quietly, clutching the crumpled paper rabbit. She looked as she always did, still, wide-eyed, shadowed with sorrow. Victoria had requested permission to bring her daughter, since there was no one to watch her, and the board had reluctantly agreed. An older member slid a folder to the center of the table, his voice ringing clear. "Miss Hale, there are rumors circulating within the company, and we have more than words. Here are images the board has received." He spread several photos across the table for all to see. The first, Victoria at Marlowe's restaurant, seated across from Ethan Cole. The children were present, but the angle deliberately cropped to highlight only her and Ethan, as if it were a private date. The second, the ground floor corridor, the storage room door ajar, a yellow glow spilling out, Victoria speaking with Ethan. The frame caught the closeness, suggesting secrecy. The room buzzed with whispers. A young director frowned, laying the photo flat. Ms. Hale, the CIO of this corporation, appearing in such images with a janitor. How do you explain this? Every gaze bore down on her. The air thickened. Victoria clenched her hands. If she denied it, she'd be fighting the evidence. If she stayed silent, her credibility would collapse. A long, sharp pause, broken only by the ticking of the clock. She drew a deep breath. Her voice rang steady, though tight. "Yes, I sat at a table with Mr. Ethan Cole. And yes, there was a conversation in the corridor. But what you assume to be inappropriate relations is utterly false. I have a daughter, Emma, who has been silent for nearly a year. Every renowned therapist has failed. Yet Ethan, simply through the sincerity of a father, brought her smile back." She paused, eyes glistening. "He, together with his daughter Sophie, are nothing more than friends of ours." The room fell silent. Some eyes softened, but then another member spoke. "Then where did these pictures come from? Who spread these rumors?" The question sliced through the room like a blade. All eyes turned back to Victoria, waiting. Her gaze shifted, calm yet sharp, locking on Richard Grant, the deputy finance director seated across the table. "The one who invited me to that restaurant was you, Richard, and the picture in the storage corridor. Only someone nearby could have taken it. Can you truly say you had nothing to do with this?" Richard flinched, his face paling before hardening again. I don't know what you're talking about. I had nothing to do with those photos. Another board member snapped. Answer directly, Mr. Grant. Did this rumor start with you? Sweat beaded his forehead. He bit his lip. I just... Maybe someone else. Victoria's hand clenched, her eyes unyielding. Richard, can you look the board in the eye and swear you weren't behind this? The room stilled. The weight of every stare pressed on him. Richard trembled, his head dropping. His voice cracked. At first, it was just a prank. I wanted to see how cold Hale would react sitting with a janitor. But it didn't go as I expected. She wasn't humiliated. Emma even smiled. I was furious. And then, I turned the prank into a rumor. I spread the photos. A wave of outrage rippled around the table. Whispers turned to scorn. You demeaned a colleague for your own pettiness, one member spat. Amid the taut air, a fragile sound suddenly rose. Emma, still seated beside her mother, slowly stood. Her small hands trembled, but her eyes shone. She drew a deep breath and spoke, her voice shaky. Mommy is not bad. Mr. Ethan and Sophie are my friends. The words echoed in the sealed boardroom. Every face froze. Some eyes widened, some hands dropped. Then, like a tide, emotion swelled. An older director wiped at his eyes. Another whispered. She spoke, after nearly a year of silence. Victoria broke down, clutching Emma to her chest. Tears streamed, but her smile was radiant. You're so brave, Emma. You just saved Mommy. No more proof was needed. No one in the room could believe the malicious rumor any longer. The CEO, who had watched silently until now, rose to her feet. Her voice thundered, cold and decisive. Mr. Grant, you have demeaned a colleague, sown toxic rumors, and damaged the company's honor. As of today, you are suspended from all duties, and the board will proceed with termination. Richard collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. He knew the game was over. The boardroom gradually settled after the CEO's verdict. Chairs scraped softly. Some members lowered their heads in thought. The truth was clear now, but the echo remained. The trembling voice of a child. The tears just shed. Victoria gripped Emma's small hand, regaining her breath. She looked up, meeting each gaze around the table. Her brown eyes were weary, but resolute. And one more thing. Her voice carried, calm yet firm. If someday, between me and Mr. Ethan, something truly does happen, then that is completely normal. I will take full responsibility for that decision, as a mother and as a woman. I will not be ashamed of it. The room stayed silent. But this silence was no longer suspicion. It was respect. After that stormy board meeting, Victoria stepped out of Hale Capital Tower, her legs nearly giving way. But in her arms, Emma pressed her face against her mother's shoulder and whispered, Mommy. Just one word, yet enough to make the whole world feel lighter. The car door closed. No more whispers, no more suspicious stares. Only mother and daughter, and a future beginning to open. In the days that followed, everything slowly shifted. Emma no longer hid away in her silent room. She followed her mother to the park, seeking Sophie out on her own, her eyes brightening each time she saw her friend. The two little girls sat together, drawing rainbows, sometimes leaning close to exchange tiny words. For Victoria, it was nothing short of a miracle. Ethan continued appearing in his simple routine. But now, instead of avoiding him, when their paths crossed in the hallway, Victoria smiled in greeting. At first, the smile was stiff, then gradually it grew warm. One afternoon, Victoria sat on a park bench watching the girls run circles. Ethan approached, holding a coffee cup. "You must be tired," he said, placing it beside her. Victoria nodded lightly, accepting it. "Thank you. I still owe you an apology for dragging you into this mess." Ethan shook his head. "Emma getting better is enough. I'll never regret it." She studied him longer, realizing that in his eyes there was not only past sorrow, but also a hard-won calm. A quiet kind of strength, so different from the noisy meetings she had once believed defined power. From chance encounters, they began arranging more time for the girls to play together. One weekend evening, Victoria brought Emma to Ethan's small lakeside house. Sophie rushed to the door, squealing, "Emma's here!" The modest kitchen filled with the sound of children's laughter. Ethan prepared dinner, simple dishes yet full of warmth. Chicken soup, crisp, toasted bread. Victoria felt a pang of unease, realizing it had been so long since she had sat at a true family table. Emma and Sophie sat side by side, whispering as they shared pieces of bread. In that moment, Victoria understood. This was what Emma needed. Not costly therapy sessions, but presence, warmth. Days slipped into weeks. The bond grew, not only between the two girls, but also between the two adults. Victoria began learning to set work aside on weekends, putting down her phone to go out with Emma. Ethan, long accustomed to silence, slowly opened up, sharing memories of his late wife, of why he had left the spotlight to be just an ordinary father. One evening, as the four of them sat by the lake, Sophie suddenly asked, "Daddy, if there are other kids like Emma, sad and not talking, can we help them too?" Ethan smiled, ruffling her hair. Victoria listened, her heart stirred. The thought took root. "We can do more," she said, eyes meeting his. "Not just for Emma or Sophie. We could start a fund, a small organization, to support children with emotional scars. I have the resources, you have the experience, and we have the hearts of people who've been through it." Ethan was silent for a moment, then nodded. "If we do it, it must be truly for the children, not for show." "Agreed," Victoria smiled. On the ground, the girls built a tiny Lego house. Emma, still soft-spoken, pointed to it and whispered, "For friends." Sophie squealed, "Yes, for the sad friends too, they can all come play." Victoria and Ethan exchanged a look. In the lavender dusk, they saw in each other not just allies, but the possibility of building a home, a place of healing not only for their daughters, but for many other children. In Victoria's heart, a new belief was forming. Some things matter more than power and prestige. Love, presence, and the capacity to extend one's arms. And for Ethan, he realized he might finally be ready to take another step, not only as a father, but as a companion. Life sometimes leads us down paths we never expected. A cold CIO, a father who had abandoned fame, and two children who seemed destined never to meet. Yet from loss and prejudice, they had found trust, connection, and a home slowly taking shape. This story reminds us, sometimes the strongest healing doesn't come from costly solutions, but from love, presence, and a hand willing to reach out. If you believe love can change a life, share this story to spread hope. Perhaps a word of encouragement, a hug, or a small act of kindness from you today will become a miracle for someone tomorrow.